welcome to Constellation Conversations with Robert Rowland Smith and myself, Nicola Dunn. So Robert, we were thinking about the topic for this session, and we came up with the phrase, the role of the constellator. So what would you like to start with that?
I mean, it's a big subject, as I realized when we were just having a chat before this. One way of thinking about it, perhaps, is as follows. It seems to me more or less anybody can set up a constellation. You can set it up and just kind of let it run. It's like one of those wind-up toys, and it will just run around the floor, because you can set up mum and dad and grandparents and so on, and you'll get all sorts of information. You can almost literally just let it happen. And if you don't intervene, you know, the representatives do end up kind of talking to each other, and it becomes a bit like a party among them all. And sometimes the party is a bit of a miserable one, but nevertheless, that's what it is. So I suppose the question, there is a question about degree of intervention there, because once the field is active, it does sort of keep churning like a kind of mechanical digger, so, bringing up clods of earth from deeper strata. So there are choices, I think. So the first thing to say, perhaps, is that, a constellator has quite a lot of choices to make during the course of a constellation. And without going into them, I'll just list a few as a way into this topic. You've got the choice of how much to listen to the issue holder, because it's not a 50-minute therapy session. It's going to be shorter than that. So there's going to be a question of how much do we need to get going? How much are they obscuring the topic rather than clarifying it? How much emotion are they carrying with them? So we have a question there, a choice about the length of that conversation. I think we have a choice there. We have a choice about the length of the constellation as well, when to cut it. I think we may have spoken before about the fact that particularly new constellators sometimes overrun constellations and keep on adding more and more material. So there's a choice there. There's a choice over which representatives to bring in and how many. I mean, I am a fan, I'm not sure how much you do this, Nicola, I'm a fan of minimalism in a constellation, like only bring in the elements you need to work with at the beginning, and then you can add if you need to. But if somebody's particularly activated around their late mother, let's work with the issue holder's representative and the late mother. Let's not begin with the presumption of adding all the family and friends and, So that's a choice. There are also choices about what sentences to give representatives to speak or not. And I think we should have another dedicated session, by the way, on sentences in constellations. And so on and so forth. So I think that's my beginning list, and we could probably keep adding to it. So the role of a constellator, briefly, is to make quite a lot of choices at various points during the workshop.
Yes. And so I think constellators have different styles. We'd kind of agree on that. And, you raised so many interesting points there, but I might kind of begin with the one around, are you starting from the constellator as a parent? Are you going to start with their contemporary family system, with their own children present, or are you starting with the issue holder or seeker as a child of? And that sort of demarks really in the beginning whether you're including the contemporary family or not. And sometimes there's a choice to be made there. Mm. And sometimes the seeker may have come with an issue which they know is impacting a child, in which case there's great benefit in including those representations. And sometimes you just don't have the capacity for it, or you think it may not be sort of useful or helpful at this point of time. So you start with them in their family of origin. And I think you made a really interesting point there about the initial setup that I would, so we could probably debate this, because I would say setting up the different elements of the system and letting it run is a systemic mapping but not necessarily a constellation.
Mm.
I personally probably make a distinction in the sense that a constellation is held. There is some facilitation happening, and there are decisions and choices made by that person in relation to, we talk about phenomenology, what is actually arising from those representations. So
Yeah. I'm just latching onto that distinction between a systemic mapping and a constellation. I think that's very helpful. We're not there. The role of the constellator is not exactly the same as somebody who's there to just produce a systemic map. Constellating is a bit more subtle than that. Yes, and just the word phenomenological, I'm going to pause on that a moment. I would, wouldn't I? And I suppose just to maybe be a bit didactic about it, because the word does get thrown around a bit. I think for the purposes of constellations, phenomenological, what we mean is exactly as you say, what arises, what emerges from the field, what appears. It's a beautiful word. It comes from a Greek word for, has the word light at its origin. It's just what lights up. Even dark things light up in constellations. But the important distinction there is the phenomenological is what the constellator is paying attention to, what arises, as opposed to the noumenal. So in philosophy, phenomena are opposed to noumena. Phenomena are things that arise. Noumena are thoughts in the head. And I think the role of the constellator is to tarry with what arises and be prepared to be surprised by it, as opposed to a kind of noumenal approach, which is, I've thought this through, this is what should now happen, or I'm going to stick this here and that there. You may have some hypotheses, so another role of the constellator might be to have a hypothesis like, I think there's something funny going on with their grandmother here. Let's test that out. But the ability to also shed the hypothesis immediately when the phenomenology produces something different, I think is critical. So the role of the constellator really is phenomenological in that sense. It's really remaining open to what arises and being able to abandon hypotheses as soon as they don't become verified in the reports of the representatives.
Absolutely. I love the way you've described that, Robert. So when you were talking about phenomena, it reminds me of, I see it a little bit like surfing. I don't surf myself, but if you watch a surfer on YouTube, it's fantastic. And I might have used this metaphor before, but it's this fantastic relationship between the waves that keep coming and the decisions that the surfer makes. And so the same thing is happening in a constellation. And so, our issue holder or seeker may come with some, personal challenge, which is often quite painful and may also involve a kind of, a younger experience of wounding. So if you were to just take the wounding and think, well, obviously that's because X, Y, and Z, you're not, opening yourself up to the phenomena. So, yeah, you may have some hypothesis which you hold lightly, but actually it may be some other sort of systemic event in the family that is actually connected to this.
This image of the surfer I like, because the other element of that, which you're hinting at anyway, is the possibility of an imminent engulfing by the wave above you. I mean, at any moment you could lose your footing or be swallowed up by the tsunami. And there are moments in a constellation, and I think some of the best constellations have some of the worst moments in them. In other words, when you do feel lost or crashed or radically uncertain or unsure of where to turn. And holding your nerve through those moments as the wave comes over you, I think is vital. because I think a lot of newer constellators really panic when people in the constellation become angry or chaotic or disruptive or whatever, and they try and intervene and say, oh, okay, let's do that then, or they allow themselves to be lobbied by their representatives and they lose control a bit. But I think sometimes just being washed over by that wave can be helpful. I mean, sometimes there are moments in constellations where suddenly everybody feels incredibly tired or incredibly bored or irritated. These things happen, and allowing, so the role of the constellator there, I think, is to allow that space to happen and see it as phenomenological. This is what the system is. There is boredom in this system. There is anger in this system. There is irritation in the system. What's it serving? Why?
And where does it belong? So
yeah.
So we're going to run with this metaphor on the surfing, but you are, let's say you're hit by a wave, you're rolled, you're crashing into the sand, you've got a mouthful, but the constellator gets back up as the surfer does. Hopefully their board is still attached. They grab their board, they go back into the surf. They know that was not a helpful lead, and as you say, you may have hit something which is like a invisible but quite powerful sort of boundary in the constellation. So you've got options. You can always take a pause at that moment. You can get the representatives to all sit down. You can connect again one-to-one with the issue holder or seeker. You can then come back. I think I agree with you. It's not, in a way, we're almost asking, are there any mistakes in constellations? And what's the difference between a mistake and hitting a boundary within the system where that information is not yet wanting to become available?
That's very interesting about hitting those boundaries, because in a way it's those boundaries that tell us, if there's a boundary, it tells us there's something to be hidden. There's something behind the boundary. A boundary has a purpose, which is to keep us off the scent of something, in a way. So a boundary is also something we need to gently kind of use our gentle battering ram against, actually.
Yes. And I think, sometimes it might be a moment when you're going to sit down with the issue holder or seeker and say, there is a sense of something here. Who might you have a conversation with in real life, within your family or personal system, who might be able to share something about this? And in my experience, often they might say a grandparent or an aunt or someone, because often information does come from aunts and uncles, which you might be aware, or great aunts and uncles. And so often they add information in which they feel the person should know, but perhaps the parents haven't been able to, or felt resourced enough to fully disclose.
I was just thinking of another metaphor then, which is a bit like a detective, because you are in a way hunting for clues as you go through a constellation, and sometimes hidden clues, sometimes things hiding in plain sight, actually, which is perhaps the most common thing. But also in relation to what you said about sitting people down, again, there are different constellator styles, and I said my style tends to be a bit minimalist. So I will bring people into a constellation, but only for as long as they are helping to solve the mystery, solve the crime, as it were. And then I'll sit them down again. Because what I've noticed is that if you keep a lot of people in a constellation, they will pipe up, and that can be helpful, but it can also be distracting, and it can often be a decoy as well, because they're speaking from their own place in the system and have their own needs too. So I think there is a bit of Sherlock Holmesery around this, which is, okay, we found that out, and now we've ruled out the impossibles, so in however incredible, it must be the truth, sort of thing.
And there are so many sort of threads or stories or unresolved experiences in family systems. And as you say, the more representations you add, the more lids you're opening. And if you've opened a lid, then you need to decide what you're going to do with that information now that it's available. But you do have your navigating compass of the issue that the issue holder or seeker has brought. So the sense that you're calibrating that within your own system as the constellator. So that is, it's important information, but is it important to this particular issue?
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I think, the role of the constellator, and we talked before about who is the client. Is it the individual? Is it the system? Maybe there's another take on that, and a third answer to the question, which is the client is the issue, in the sense that, we could go around the whole constellation sorting out everybody's issue. And in doing that, of course, you produce more because you go back into their systems, and it would, be an infinitely expanding process. So the idea of the issue, it's not a word I love, by the way, not that I prefer problem, but it does focus us a bit. So we do need a bit of focus. And the focus is the client in a way.
And in a way, maybe focus is better than issue. What is the focus of this constellation? And I think it'd be interesting to sort of compare. I mean, I'm not a maximist, so I think I'm probably near it. You might call yourself a minimalist, but actually we're probably quite close in the form and shape that we might, these days set up a constellation. So I think the thing is, I don't know if you experience this, but I do have a sense of a certain amount of energy for a constellation that the field is producing. And so therefore, we are subject to kind of Chronos and a ticking clock. And so I know in other scenarios, there are people who would, let a constellation roll for, hours, and people would drift off and go have cups of tea and come back. And that's not my style, but it is a style. It is a style that is available. And of course, there are other people who do very, very large constellations and hold them extremely well. So it's, I think it is finding your own, it's your own, when you say recipe, it's not that it's something that's fixed, but you have a sense of measurements maybe.
Yeah, and in the organizational work I do, the groups are often larger, so, up to 40 people. And I take a fairly pragmatic view in that case, which is to include more people, because I want to give people an experience of representing in a constellation. It's not that I think that's what the issue needs. It isn't, but I'm making a more pragmatic choice about, okay, here's an organizational client. Some of them are quite skeptical. This could be an interesting learning experience for them. So let's create some role. It's a bit like a school play. Everybody in class has to have a role. So, you be third snowman, and then everybody gets a go kind of thing. And I know, I don't make it explicit, that there's, as it were, an inner constellation, which is the real focus. And then there's an outer constellation, which is the school play element. But I kind of think that's okay, as a choice, because it's a different environment.
And one thing I would add with that, because I imagine maybe what's happening too, and I've been in big constellation settings as well, is sometimes if someone is in the group and is, their arms are crossed, they're huffing and sighing a little bit, there is a sense that this is their first experience and they're not convinced. So that the atmosphere that they're creating impacts everyone. So sometimes you might make a choice, as you were saying, your third snowman, to have them come in a maybe a lighter role, but just to have an experience in order that whatever is personal to them somehow might start to melt a little and their own personal barriers, and allow them to actually join the process and also therefore be impacted by it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's very nicely said. And I can picture those people. I've had, lots of them over the years. And partly, of course, it is a plea for attention, but attention on their own terms. I was thinking there is another kind of critical choice, almost fundamental choice that you have as a constellator that belongs to the role of the constellator, which is whether you run that person's constellation or not.
Yes.
Now, it's pretty rare that I won't run a constellation for somebody who sat down next to me. And also we work slightly differently. I think, you have people who are pre-chosen to do a constellation. So it's a slightly different dynamic, possibly for you. But I have had occasions where I've said to somebody, you're not ready, or you're overripe, or something like that, because I've had constellations junkies basically just come back and they want to do another. Can we look at this again? Can we look at that again? And I've said a couple of times, I think it's more a question of listening to the previous constellation and absorbing that than trying to do another one, because they become sort of tourists of their own psyche, or worse, they become voyeurs of other people in their system. They're just want to find out. And then for some people, it's just sometimes the conversation is enough. Actually, it's possible, I'm sure you've had this experience, where something is named in the conversation, and that's the constellation becomes superfluous, actually.
Yes, I mean, I think it's interesting, because I do my people at my workshops can pre-book to actually, so they know they're going to do their issue, but I would still reserve the right to say and to make a decision as to whether I felt setting up a constellation was going to serve them best.
Mm.
And so it's very rare that I would not do a constellation with someone, but I still need to feel that I have that freedom, because then I have the freedom to serve the client in the way that I believe is best in that moment. And as you say, I mean, in the later days, with Bert, he didn't sometimes set up constellations. He had a systemic conversation, or even a systemic experience. Sometimes it was wordless with people, but they still were impacted. So the constellation happened, but it may not have been visible to the group, is the way I would put it. As you're describing, we don't really do curiosity about family systems or other people's business. It does need to feel that the focus that's being brought is heartfelt for the issue holder and seeker. So there's some kind of commitment to it, and that's personal. And if you have that secure base, then I think you've got a good start for a constellation. But not so if it is merely a curiosity, or to do something in order not to take an action in real life that needs to be attended to.
Yes, I've got a slightly pretentious take on that, actually, as I would, which is, but I also feel a bit possessive or protective over constellations or the field, as if to say, look, this is beautiful work. You can't just barge in here and, stomp around in it. It's a thing of beauty, and the beauty of the constellation. I mean, I'm very given to the kind of the aesthetic of the constellation, however you might understand that word, but the kind of tenderness, the harmony and disharmonies of it, the euphony and otherwise of the kind of music of the constellation. And I feel like I want to protect that as a kind of sacred space. I mean, I don't know why I feel I have the right to do that. Perhaps I shouldn't, but I do have a bit of that. And for me, the role of the constellator is also to lay something on the shrine of constellations as well. It's like, here's a constellation I've made to give back to the field or wherever it comes from. It isn't perfect. I've done my best, but I've tried to hold that, and respect it as much as possible. So with the client, I also want to feel like there's somebody who agrees with that, my intention around that, although it's never vocalized, as opposed to somebody who might really just be, and it's very rare this happens, just using the process for what they can get. I mean, I have had a couple of horrible occasions where people have literally turned up, done their constellation and buggered off. Just thinking, you know, it's only happened, I think, twice, probably in 20 years, but it has happened. So there's that choice for us too.
Yes, so we're kind of talking about ambivalence, aren't we? And it's fine to be ambivalent, but I think just that the balance needs to be more that you are prepared to take the step of the constellation. But it's a joint step. It's both the issue holder and seeker, and it's the constellator. We're taking a step together. So in that initial connection, you know, we are resonating to see whether we can make that step together, whether it's going to be useful for the issue holder or seeker. And if not, if one of us is hesitating too much, then maybe it's not the moment. Doesn't mean there won't be a moment, a future moment, but it just means that actually right now there may be a little bit more, as you would say, kind of simmering that needs to happen over time. I agree with you around, you know, what you present at the altar, that we are respectful of the work that we're allowed to participate in. So for me, it's not a game. It's something deep. And so I think, as you said, if people want something different to that, then obviously they can always go elsewhere. Yeah.
Very good. Now, I'm conscious of time, so we should probably start bringing things to a close. But having this conversation with you, Nicola, realizes that we've kind of scratched the surface of this question. There's so many different elements, aren't there, to what the role of the constellator is. So we might need to have a part 2 at some point.
Exactly, because we'll be thinking in the meantime, once the camera has stopped, and I'm sure there'll be much more to say, but I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. And if you've been watching, you can follow up by looking at Nicola's website, which is nicoladunnconstellations.com, and mine is robertrowlandsmith.com. And you can follow us on YouTube, do subscribe and like and all those good social media things. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Robert.